Welcome to Everyday Kindness, a place where gentle stories touch the heart and remind us that compassion still lives in the world. Here, every tale begins with softness, grows with emotion, and ends with a reminder that kindness, no matter how small, can change a life. Stay with us as we explore moments of love, courage, and humanity, one story at a time. The great hall of the manor was bathed in warm, liquid sunlight that streamed through the tall, arched windows, painting golden patterns across the polished wooden floor. Morning had only just begun, but the manor was already alive with a quiet, dignified energy, servants moving through distant corridors, the rustle of expensive gowns, the soft murmur of nobles gathered for a ceremony they deemed far more significant than the child at its center could ever understand. Chandeliers glimmered faintly even in daylight, their crystals reflecting the sun like tiny stars suspended above a kingdom of velvet and marble. In the middle of the hall, standing alone in a soft pink dress, was the young lady Emilia, barely 3 years old, delicate as a blossom and just as unaware of the world that surrounded her. Her blonde curls glowed like threads of light, catching every beam that touched them. She held her tiny hands in front of her, unsure, her round blue eyes fixed on the woman kneeling before her. That woman, gentle, patient, humble, was Annabelle, the newest maid of the manor but the one who had, within weeks, become the only person capable of calming the little princess. Annabelle's uniform was simple but spotless, the white apron crisp against the dark fabric of her dress. She kneeled with her back straight, her eyes warm, her hands extended with quiet reassurance toward the child who trusted her more than anyone else in the room. Around them, a semicircle of nobles watched with unreadable expressions, some curious, some judgmental, some mildly annoyed that the child preferred a maid's touch over their own refined guidance. Lord Edwin, the man standing tallest among them, observed the scene with a stern but thoughtful expression. His grey suit fit him perfectly, his posture rigid as though carved from tradition itself. He was the guardian of the little girl after the tragic passing of her parents, and though he carried the responsibility with unwavering determination, he had never learned the language of children. He led armies of men with ease, negotiated politics with precision, but a toddler's fears and whims were to him a battlefield unfamiliar and disarming. Annabelle, however, seemed born to understand hearts too young to speak for themselves. "Good morning, Lady Emilia," she whispered softly. Her voice was a soothing melody, one that even the stiff atmosphere of the hall could not dim. "Are you ready?" The little girl stared at her for a moment. Then, almost timidly, she nodded. A murmur rippled through the nobles. They had tried repeatedly to prepare Emilia for the formal introductions that were about to take place, introductions that would officially present her as the heir to the manor and its legacy. But she had refused to respond to anyone. Anyone except Annabelle. Annabelle gently held the child's hands. "You don't have to be scared. Everyone here just wants to meet you. And I'll stay with you the whole time." The child's lips quivered, her chin trembling the way it often did just before she began to cry. Annabelle moved slightly closer, lowering her head so their eyes met on the same level. Emilia blinked at her, searching her face for something, safety, maybe. Or permission to be brave. When she found it, she stepped forward. Annabelle smiled, a soft, subtle smile that could melt even the coldest of gazes. Even Lord Edwin found his posture loosening, an almost imperceptible sigh escaping his chest. The head steward, a thin, precise man who took pride in never smiling, cleared his throat. "Shall we begin the presentation, my lord?" Lord Edwin nodded. Annabelle didn't move from her kneeling position. She wanted Emilia to feel grounded, held, supported. She knew the ceremony mattered to the nobles, but for the child, what mattered was knowing she was not alone. "Lady Emilia," Annabelle whispered, "do you want to hold my hands while we stand?" The child didn't answer. Instead, she took 2 tiny steps, placed her warm little palms into Annabelle's, and waited. So Annabelle stood, slowly, gracefully, lifting the child's hands as she rose. The nobles watched, some with admiration, others with disapproval, because they believed a maid should not hold the heir's hand in public. But none dared interrupt. The little girl's calmness was too fragile, too precious to risk. Once Annabelle was standing beside the child, Emilia pressed closer to her, hiding half behind her skirt. The gesture was innocent, but it poked at the pride of several nobles like an accidental insult. They whispered among themselves, about how the child clung too tightly, how the maid was given too much influence, how the guardian had lost control over the young heir. Lord Edwin heard them. He always did, but instead of silencing them, he simply observed. His eyes followed Annabelle's calm movements, the way she gently guided Emilia forward, one small step at a time, until they reached the center of the hall where the presentation was to begin. Annabelle leaned down slightly. Remember, just look at me if you get scared. I'm right here. Emilia nodded once more and squeezed her hand, a tiny squeeze, but one full of trust. The steward stepped forward. His voice echoed grandly, though it held no warmth. Presenting Lady Emilia of the House of Hawthorne, heir to the lineage, guardian of the lands and legacy of the late Lord and Lady Hawthorne. The nobles bowed their heads in unison. Emilia whimpered. Annabelle immediately knelt once again, lowering herself so quickly that a few nobles flinched. She took both of Emilia's hands gently into hers and whispered, "It's okay. Look at me, not them." The child obeyed. Annabelle's hands were warm, soft, steady. Emilia's breathing slowed. Then, without prompting, she lifted her head slightly and looked around, just for a moment. But in that moment, the hall seemed to breathe with her. Even the nobles stayed silent, taken aback by the simple bravery of a child who only minutes ago couldn't stand alone. When she settled again, she leaned forward and touched her forehead gently to Annabelle's. The gesture was so pure, so unexpected, that it melted even the rigid expression of Lord Edwin. A low, emotional stir moved through the hall. Annabelle whispered, "You did wonderfully." And the child, proud of herself for reasons she couldn't yet name, smiled faintly. It was the first time anyone had seen her smile since her parents' passing. After the ceremony, the nobles dispersed, whispering still, about the maid, the child, the impropriety, the strange bond between them. But none could deny the truth. Annabelle had succeeded where every tutor, nanny, governess, and noblewoman had failed. She had reached the child's heart. Lord Edwin dismissed the court with a wave of his hand but remained where he stood, watching Annabelle as she lifted Emilia into her arms. The little girl wrapped her tiny arms around the maid's neck, clinging not out of fear, but out of comfort. Annabelle held her with the tenderness of someone who had nothing to gain and everything to give. "You have a gift," Lord Edwin said when he finally approached. His voice was low, controlled, as always, but there was something softer than usual beneath it. "She listens to you." Annabelle bowed her head respectfully. "I only try to understand her, my lord. She has lost more than a child should ever lose." Emilia rested her head on Annabelle's shoulder, her eyes drifting closed. She looked peaceful, content, even safe. Lord Edwin observed the scene for a long moment. "Would you continue to care for her? Not just as a maid, but as someone she can depend on?" Annabelle hesitated. "If it pleases my lord. And if it is what Lady Emilia needs." "It is," he said quietly. "She chose you herself." Annabelle looked down at the little girl sleeping soundly against her. She felt a swell of something warm and protective rise in her chest, an emotion she had not expected to feel so deeply. "I will take care of her," she whispered. "For as long as she needs me." Lord Edwin nodded, but neither of them knew then how deeply their lives would soon intertwine, nor how the bond between the maid and the little princess would become the heart of a story that would shake the foundations of the manor itself. The corridors of Hawthorne Manor were quieter than usual in the days that followed the presentation. It was as though the walls themselves had begun observing Annabelle more closely, curious about the young woman who had so effortlessly stepped into a role no one else could fill. Servants whispered about her gentle ways, nobles murmured with unease about her influence, and Lord Edwin found himself noticing details he had previously ignored, the steadiness in her voice, the warmth she carried like a lantern into each shadowed corner of Emilia's life. Annabelle herself remained unaware of the storm she had stirred. Her world had shrunk to the size of a child's heartbeat, the soft rhythms of Emilia's laughter, her tiny footsteps echoing in the nursery, her small hands reaching out each morning as though Annabelle were the sun rising just for her. Every morning, before the manor fully awakened, Annabelle would tiptoe into Emilia's room. The little girl always woke slowly, blinking sleep from her eyes as though waking from a dream she wanted to keep holding. Annabelle would sit at the edge of her bed, humming softly, brushing her fingers through Emilia's golden curls until the child stretched, yawned, and nestled into her arms. On one such morning, Emilia whispered, "Nana." Annabelle froze. It wasn't her name, but it was the closest thing Emilia had spoken to a name since her parents' death. Her throat tightened, her eyes stinging unexpectedly. She wasn't Emilia's nurse, nor her mother, nor her family. She was just a maid, and yet, it had been Annabelle whom the little girl chose to cling to in the quiet hours of dawn. "Do you want me to be your Nana?" Annabelle asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emilia nodded, pressing her forehead into Annabelle's shoulder. And in that fragile moment, something inside Annabelle shifted, something deep and instinctive, something that told her she would guard this child with everything in her. But not everyone in the manor felt the same softness toward her. Dash dash dash. Lady Agatha, Lord Edwin's aunt and the most commanding voice among the nobles, was decidedly unimpressed. A tall woman with sharp eyes and a personality as unyielding as the marble columns of the manor, she believed that order was maintained by distance, discipline, and unwavering tradition. Annabelle, in her gentle, unassuming way, had undone years of carefully constructed expectations simply by being kind. On the fourth morning after the presentation, Lady Agatha summoned Lord Edwin to the drawing room. The air there always felt heavy, perfumed by polished wood and old secrets. "She is a maid, Edwin," Agatha said without preamble. "A maid, not a governess and certainly not a member of this family." Lord Edwin stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, watching the gardens outside where roses swayed in the wind. "I am aware. Are you?" Agatha's voice sharpened. "Because from where I stand, it seems you are allowing her far too much influence." "She is good for Emilia," he replied simply. Agatha scoffed. "Emilia needs structure. She needs discipline. She needs to be raised as the heir she was born to be. Not coddled and carried around by a servant with no understanding of nobility." Edwin's jaw tightened. "She is 3 years old, aunt." "She is a Hawthorne," Agatha countered. "And if she is to inherit the manor, she must be shaped, not softened." He finally turned to her, his gaze steady, unwavering. "She lost her parents. I will not strip her of comfort simply because it offends your sense of order." Agatha pressed her lips together. "And what of appearances? The staff already whispers that she prefers the maid above all others. The nobles have begun questioning your leadership. They say you are allowing your household to be run by." "Enough." His voice cut through the room like a blade. "Annabelle will continue caring for Emilia. That is final." Agatha stared at him, startled by the steel in his tone. She had forgotten, perhaps, that Edwin was a man shaped by war and responsibility, someone who did not raise his voice unless the matter touched something deeply sacred to him. "Very well," she said at last, though her eyes glittered with something unspoken. "But do not mistake that girl's kindness for loyalty. Servants can be molded into something else entirely when given too much importance." Edwin said nothing, but the warning lingered long after Agatha left the room. Dash dash dash. Meanwhile, unaware of the storm brewing amongst the nobles, Annabelle and Emilia enjoyed a rare moment of quiet joy in the manor gardens. The gardens were Emilia's favorite place, bright, colorful, and free from judgmental eyes. Annabelle held her hand as they walked along the gravel path, pointing out flowers, butterflies, and the occasional squirrel that darted across their path. "Look," Annabelle whispered, kneeling beside a rose bush, "this one is just beginning to bloom." Emilia touched the soft petals with gentle curiosity. "Pretty," she whispered. "Yes, very pretty," Annabelle said, but her gaze was fixed on Emilia rather than the flower. It was in these simple moments that Annabelle felt her heart growing dangerously entangled. She had come to the manor seeking nothing more than work, food, shelter, a chance to rebuild her life. She had never imagined she would find a child who wrapped herself around her heart like a vine, refusing to let go. As they continued walking, Emilia suddenly tugged on Annabelle's skirt. "Up," she said softly. Annabelle smiled and lifted her into her arms. The little girl snuggled against her chest, resting her head beneath Annabelle's chin. It was an act of pure trust, one that made Annabelle press a soft kiss to her hair before she could stop herself. From a distance, someone was watching. Lord Edwin stood on the balcony overlooking the garden. His intent had been to observe discreetly, to ensure Emilia was safe, to understand the sudden bond between his ward and the maid. But as he watched Annabelle holding the child with such tender protectiveness, something unexpected tightened in his chest. He had never seen Emilia so peaceful, so unguarded, nor had he ever seen Annabelle so radiant. And that frightened him, not because it was wrong, but because it was beginning to feel right. Dash dash dash. Later that afternoon, the manor fell into a tense hush as Lady Agatha gathered a few select nobles for tea. She had not forgotten Edwin's sharp dismissal, and she had no intention of letting Annabelle's influence grow unchecked. "She is a threat," one noblewoman whispered. "The girl is already attached to her. And if the child's affections overshadow the authority of the Hawthorne family?" Another murmured, "This could become very dangerous." Agatha nodded grimly. "Which is why we must proceed carefully. The maid is not malicious, she is simply naive. But naive people can disrupt entire households without meaning to." "And Lord Edwin?" someone asked. A cold smile touched Agatha's lips. "He is a good man. Too good, perhaps. He will see reason, eventually." None of them noticed the young footman standing near the doorway, silently pouring tea, listening to every word. And that footman later found Annabelle alone in the corridor, carrying Emilia's toys back to the nursery. He hesitated before speaking. Miss Annabelle. She turned kindly. Yes. He lowered his voice. You should be careful. The nobles are not pleased with how much Lady Emilia favors you. Lady Agatha, she is planning something. Annabelle's heart skipped. Something. What do you mean? I don't know, he admitted. But her exact words were that the household needs to be corrected. Annabelle felt a chill run down her spine. Emilia. They would try to separate her from Emilia. Thank you, she whispered. For telling me. The footman nodded and hurried away, leaving Annabelle standing in the dim corridor, clutching the toys a little too tightly. For the first time since she arrived at the manor, she felt afraid. That night, after Emilia fell asleep, Annabelle stayed by her bedside longer than usual. She watched the gentle rise and fall of the child's chest, the way her small fingers curled around the edge of her blanket, the faint smile that flickered in her sleep. I won't let them take you from me, Annabelle whispered softly. I promise. But promises whispered in the dark rarely withstand the harsh light of morning. The next day, Lord Edwin summoned Annabelle to his study. Annabelle's heart pounded as she entered, fearing the worst. Edwin stood near the fireplace, his expression unreadable. You asked for me, my lord, she said quietly. He turned to her slowly. I did. There was a long silence. Annabelle's fingers twisted nervously in her apron. Is something wrong? Edwin studied her face, her anxious eyes, her trembling lips, the quiet strength beneath her fear. Annabelle, he said gently, I want you to understand something clearly. She braced herself. You are not in trouble. Relief washed through her so visibly that Edwin almost smiled. In fact, he continued, I asked you here because I need your help. My help? Yes. He took a step toward her. Something is happening among the nobles. Something I cannot fully control. They are beginning to question your role in Emilia's life. Annabelle felt her breath catch. I can step back if it is causing trouble. No. His voice was firm, steady. You will not step back. She blinked. But, the nobles, I don't answer to them, Edwin said calmly. And neither do you. Annabelle stared at him, stunned. He continued, Emilia needs you. And I intend to protect what she needs, regardless of who approves. For a moment, Annabelle forgot how to speak. She had expected reprimand, warning, perhaps even dismissal. But not this. Not loyalty. Not support. Thank you, my lord, she whispered. He took another step closer. Not enough to touch her, but enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. This household is changing, Annabelle. And whether you intended it or not, you are at the heart of that change. Annabelle lowered her gaze, her heart racing. Are you afraid? Edwin asked quietly. She hesitated. A little. You don't have to be. His voice softened. Not as long as I am here. There was something in his tone, something protective, something deeper, something unspoken, that made her chest tighten. But just as the moment settled between them, a loud knock on the door shattered the stillness. Lady Agatha entered without waiting to be invited. And the look she gave Annabelle made it painfully clear. This was only the beginning. Lady Agatha's entrance into the study felt like a cold wind sweeping through a warm room, sharp, unwelcome, and chilling in its purpose. Annabelle straightened instinctively, her hands folding behind her back as though bracing herself for whatever storm was about to come. Edwin's expression remained calm, but a subtle tension tightened his shoulders. Edwin, we must speak at once, Agatha declared, ignoring Annabelle entirely. Edwin did not move. We are already speaking. Agatha pressed her lips into a thin line. In private. Annabelle immediately bowed. I will leave, my lord. But Edwin lifted a hand, stopping her. No, you will stay. His voice was measured, controlled, but firm. What concerns Lady Emilia concerns the one who cares for her most. Agatha's eyes narrowed. How progressive of you. Annabelle stood frozen, her heart pounding as Agatha stepped deeper into the room. I will not waste time, Agatha said. Several nobles have approached me with concerns, serious concerns, about the influence of a maid on the future heir of the Hawthorne estate. It is improper, unsuitable, and potentially dangerous. Edwin raised an eyebrow. Dangerous. Emotionally dangerous, Agatha insisted. The child clings to her as though she were her own mother. What will happen when the maid leaves? Or worse, becomes attached beyond her station? Annabelle swallowed hard. Edwin stepped forward. Annabelle is not dangerous. She is kind, and Emilia needs kindness. Agatha's eyes flashed. And what of the manor's image? Its structure, its legacy. You are allowing a servant to replace what should be the role of a governess or a noble guardian. She earned Emilia's trust, Edwin replied. None of your hand-picked governesses could even approach her without making her cry. Agatha stepped closer, lowering her voice. Then you must change that. Remove the maid from the child's side for a while. Let Emilia adapt to proper guidance. Annabelle's breath hitched. Her fingers dug into her skirt to keep them from trembling. Edwin's expression darkened. I will not force a grieving child to adapt to coldness just because it suits you. Agatha turned to Annabelle sharply. And you, do you not see the harm your presence may cause in the long run? A servant cannot become the center of a noble child's world. Annabelle's voice finally emerged, soft but steady. I do not seek to replace anything, my lady. I only do what she needs. That is precisely the problem, Agatha replied. You make yourself indispensable. Edwin stepped protectively in front of Annabelle. This conversation is over. No, Edwin. Agatha's voice softened in a way that was far more chilling. You must make a decision. Either remove the maid from Emilia's daily life, or I will convene the council and challenge your guardianship. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Annabelle felt the air vanish from her lungs. Challenge his guardianship. That meant Agatha wanted control over Emilia. Full control. And she would strip Annabelle from the child's life without hesitation. Edwin's eyes hardened into steel. You would do that to your own blood? For the good of the Hawthorne name, Agatha replied. Edwin stared at her long enough for Annabelle to fear something irreversible was about to happen. Then he spoke. With or without the council, he said calmly, I will protect Emilia. And I will protect Annabelle. Agatha stiffened. Is that your final word? It is. Agatha inhaled sharply, fury barely contained.